The original idea behind this research was that evidence in the field of voluntary service and volunteering is overwhelmingly anecdotal, and therefore we wanted to find out if there were any studies, reports or existing research that's out there that demonstrates the impact of voluntary service on the young volunteers. From an Irish perspective, a recent survey showed an increase in volunteering and community involvement over the last 4 years. So I think that's good news, particularly when you consider how busy people's lives are, with family and work and business commitments, and I know certainly in certain parts of Ireland, increasing commuting times.
The one thing that we should be able to do with detailed research would be to improve the quality of voluntary service. If we know what kind of service has what kind of impact, then we should be able to tailor our service programs and our pre-service training and our accompaniments, counselling and mentorship during service and in post-service training and advice work on how to maximise the impact of voluntary service, especially of particular kinds of programme for particular kinds of impact. If the potential is there to upscale voluntary service, to make use of its potential as a toolbox for social change, then voluntary service has got to be prepared to accept something like the cold light of empirical research, the cold light of evidence-based policy shined upon it. It's going to have to become more and more skilled at and adept at using research and using empirical monitoring evaluation tools, and to be able to demonstrate that it can have an impact, the magnitude of the impact, the nature of the impact, and what the conditions are, the preconditions are for maximising that impact according to the goals which have been set for it.
We do need personal commitment from people, more and more. We've got to keep our society together. And I think it's not just, young people or indeed senior citizens. All these things have to be done by many people. So we want as many people as possible to be involved, whether it be in the Commission, in the Council. We want these voluntary services to become an over-the-board service throughout the European Union. And I hope that this will also enable us to take a closer look at the preconditions, the criteria whereby these services can be offered in a qualified way and obtain results.
The aim of the study, firstly, was to document the nature and scope of service in SADC. Now, when I use the word service, I'm meaning civic service. Steve talked about voluntary service. That, too, is a feature of this type of service. We also then looked at volunteering, but we'll come to talk about the relationship between those two terms in our region. But the Global Service Institute is particularly interested in service. To those of you who live and work in a European context, that might sound like a strange criterion. Surely there are experienced in-country researchers. That is not the case. Firstly, for two reasons. Firstly, service and volunteering is not a field in Africa. It is not an area of investigation in the academic community. It is a new area, although there's lots of activity around it, but it is not a sphere of inquiry.
But large numbers of poor people volunteer across all the countries in the region, which is a fascinating finding because it shows that there is a difference between first world and developing societies. The servers were mainly women, and of those women who served in community-based HIV/AIDS programs especially, those were mainly older women. Now, our research, as I said, points to mutuality of benefits to both parties. The servers had very strong cultural and religious motivations. They had a great desire to build democracies and building democratic participation at a very local level. They were also committed to, they participated because they perceived themselves to gain both as individuals and that their communities would benefit.
Globalization and the world getting so small, I think these are issues that they're in Africa, we're in Europe, but we can tackle together, and we can look at experiences, mutual experiences, and learn from each other. And, you know, voluntary service, volunteering, we all know contributes to economic development, to social development, to political development, to democracy, and the personal development of the server. So I think we have there enough stuff to get going and start cooperate.
One of AFSO's aims is to advocate for more inclusive volunteer service programs. And the topic of inclusion work has become a quite current topic today. It is receiving much more attention, as it should. And so we felt the need to look into this in more detail. And as Agnes said, we wanted to also keep in mind the European thematic years, but not only the European thematic years, the year of 2008 of intercultural dialogue, but also the European year of 2007 of equal opportunities for all. So why are we doing this research? The migration trends, especially since the Second World War, have diversified the European nations, and at the same time, discrimination and racism is increasing. According to a special Eurobarometer on discrimination in the EU, which was published in January 2007, so this year, it specified that 64% of European citizens had perceived discrimination on the basis of ethnic origin.
Well, you might know that in 2001, the European Commission has adopted a white paper called New Impetus for European Youth, and voluntary activities of young people were one of the 4 priorities, the others being participation, information, and a better knowledge, which already makes a first link to our second topic of today. And in 2002, the Council of Youth Ministers adopted a resolution on cooperation in the youth field. They just decided they would like to cooperate closer, and one of the topics on which they wanted the member states want to cooperate closer is volunteering, in fact. As far as the recognition is concerned, it is so important because it is the bridge between education and employment, and voluntary activities can really facilitate this difficult transition phase. It has already been mentioned before. And we do not see much use of already existing instruments.
Volunteerism is really a significant part of youth policies and youth activities. Last week, as the G8 summit got underway, the United Nations launched an update on the progress towards the Millennium Development Goals in sub-Saharan Africa. The report showed that despite progress, the continent remains significantly off track to meeting the global goals for fighting poverty. Volunteering is an effective and essential means to achieve the Millennium Development Goals, and it can only be achieved with the full involvement of people all over the world. In the same way, let us work together to ensure the fulfillment of commitments made by the international community for the building of knowledge on volunteerism and facilitating a common agenda for research, especially in developing countries, relevant to policymaking and enhancing the contribution of volunteerism to peace and development.
We can ignore the educational value that voluntary service has not only for the territory where it is given, but also for the person that make it. This is why, let's say, the definitions of voluntary service and voluntarism are so wide. We can go from the development, the international development, where voluntary service is a professional voluntary service with professionals that give voluntarily their service to a society, to other forms of voluntary service which are not paid, like, for example, the voluntary service foreseen in the EVS. And, but still, the discussion about this issue is extremely important. And I really think that we are in the good situation now to make a step further to this.